Little girl collects rainwater in a bucket to drink, not knowing a millionaire was watching. If the title touched your heart, just imagine what's coming next. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us where you're watching from. The rain hammered against the cracked asphalt of Willow Creek Lane like nature's own percussion, each drop echoing through the narrow alleyway where hope seemed as scarce as clean water. 8-year-old Chloe Bennett pressed her small frame against the rusted metal bucket, her blonde hair plastered to her skull as she caught every precious drop that fell from the broken gutter above their tiny apartment. "Chloe, is it working?" 6-year-old Mia's voice carried from the doorway, barely audible over the storm. Her twin sister Zoe stood beside her, both girls wrapped in a threadbare blanket that had seen better decades. "Almost full," Chloe called back, her teeth chattering from the cold. The bucket was maybe a quarter full, but she knew it had to be enough. It had to be. Their mother Rachel wouldn't be home from her night shift at the diner for another 6 hours, and this was all they had. The apartment's water had been shut off yesterday due to unpaid bills, making this emergency measure necessary. 50 feet away, Marcus Davidson sat frozen in the driver's seat of his black Tesla Model S, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. He'd been driving back from visiting his company's new acquisition site 3 blocks away, a defunct community center his team was evaluating for renovation, when the storm hit and he'd pulled over to wait it out. The scene before him hit like a physical blow to his chest. The child collecting rainwater could have been any kid, but something about her fierce determination, the way she held herself with dignity despite her circumstances, made his breath catch. He'd built a tech empire worth billions, owned houses on 3 continents, but he'd never witnessed poverty this stark, this real. His phone buzzed with another urgent message from his assistant about the merger meeting he was supposed to be preparing for. Marcus Davidson, the man Forbes called the architect of tomorrow, was supposed to be reviewing acquisition documents worth $300 million. Instead, he couldn't look away from a little girl who was collecting rainwater to survive. "Sir?" His driver's voice came through the intercom. "The Harrison Industries meeting is in 2 hours. Should we head back?" Marcus didn't answer. He was remembering another rainy day 9 years ago when everything fell apart. When Rachel disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a letter that made no sense and a hole in his heart that never healed. The little girl, Chloe, suddenly looked up, her eyes scanning the street as if she sensed someone watching. For a brief moment their eyes met through the rain-streaked window. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a sensation he'd forgotten he was capable of feeling. "Sir," the driver pressed. "Turn off the engine," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. "Wait here." He stepped out into the rain, his $1,000 shoes immediately soaking through as he walked toward the girl. With each step, his heart pounded harder, not from the cold but from a recognition he couldn't quite place. Something about her features, the shape of her eyes, the defiant tilt of her chin. "Hey there," he called gently as he approached. "That's quite a storm, isn't it?" Chloe straightened, protective instincts kicking in. She'd been taught never to talk to strangers, especially well-dressed men who appeared out of nowhere, but something in his voice seemed different, concerned rather than threatening. "We're fine," she said firmly, though her voice shook slightly. "My mom will be home soon." Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in months. The girl's bravery reminded him of someone else, someone he'd loved and lost. "I'm sure she will. I'm Marcus. What's your name?" "Chloe." The word slipped out before she could stop it. "And that's Mia and Zoe." She nodded toward her sisters, who had ventured closer to the door despite the rain. "Those are beautiful names," Marcus said, crouching down to her level, careful not to get too close. "Listen, Chloe, I couldn't help but notice. Is everything okay? Do you need help?" The question hung in the air like the storm clouds above. Chloe's first instinct was to lie, to protect what little pride her family had left. But the bucket was still only half full, and she could hear Zoe's stomach growling from the doorway. "We're just waiting for the rain to stop," she said carefully. "Mum says rainwater is sometimes cleaner than what comes from our pipes. Our water got turned off yesterday, but Mom's working extra shifts to fix it." Marcus felt his heart break a little more. He'd spent the morning worrying about stock prices and quarterly reports, while this child was literally catching rainwater to drink because of a temporary financial crisis. The contrast felt obscene. "Your mum sounds very smart and very strong," he said softly. "Is she at work?" Chloe nodded. "She works 3 jobs. She'll be home at 7 in the morning." 3 jobs. Marcus did quick mental math. If Rachel was working until 7 a.m., she'd probably started around midnight. That meant these 3 children had been alone for 7 hours already, fending for themselves in conditions that would challenge most adults. "Chloe!" Mia's voice carried a note of worry. "Mum said not to talk to strangers." "I know," Chloe called back, but she didn't move away from Marcus. Something about him felt safe, familiar in a way she couldn't explain. "Are you lost, mister?" The innocent question hit Marcus like a thunderbolt. Lost. Yes, he'd been lost for 9 years, ever since the night Rachel vanished from his life without explanation. He'd searched for her obsessively for the first 3 years, hiring private investigators, following every lead, but she'd disappeared as completely as if she'd never existed. "I think I might be," he admitted. "I was trying to find an old friend, someone I lost touch with a long time ago." "Maybe she moved far away," Chloe suggested with the simple wisdom of childhood. "People do that sometimes when they're sad." Marcus stared at her, struck by how close to the truth that observation was. "Yeah," he whispered, "maybe they do." The rain began to ease slightly, but Marcus found himself reluctant to leave. Something about this encounter felt significant, though he couldn't put his finger on what. He pulled out his phone and quickly transferred money to a local grocery delivery service. "Chloe, I'm going to do something that might seem strange, but I promise it's just because I want to help. Some groceries are going to be delivered to your address in about an hour. Can you make sure you and your sisters stay inside until your mom gets home?" Chloe's eyes widened. "We can't accept charity," she said firmly, echoing words she'd obviously heard from her mother. "Mom says we take care of ourselves." "It's not charity," Marcus said gently. "It's payment for showing me that there are still brave, honest people in the world. Sometimes adults need reminding of that." Before Chloe could protest further, Marcus stood and walked back toward his car, but he didn't get in. Instead, he stood there, rain still falling on his expensive suit, watching as Chloe carefully carried her bucket inside to share with her sisters. As the apartment door closed, Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed a number he'd committed to memory years ago. "Peterson? It's Marcus Davidson. I need you to run a trace on a Rachel Bennett, currently living at 247 Willow Creek Lane, Unit 3B. I need everything. Employment records, medical files, background check, everything you can find." "Kitty," he paused, his voice breaking slightly. "And Peterson? I think I may have found her." Rachel Bennett's hands shook as she counted the crumpled bills from her 3rd job of the night. $43.16 in tips from a 6-hour shift cleaning office buildings downtown. Combined with her diner wages and the weekend house-cleaning gig, it would barely cover rent, let alone food for the week. She sat in her beat-up Honda Civic in the parking lot of Global Industries Tower, watching the sun rise over a city that had never felt more hostile. At 36, Rachel felt like she was aging in dog years, each day a marathon of survival that left her more exhausted than the last. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. "Rent is 3 days late. Need payment by Friday or eviction proceedings begin." Friday was tomorrow. Rachel closed her eyes and allowed herself one moment of despair before pushing it down. She'd gotten good at that over the years, compartmentalizing fear, boxing up desperation, filing away the constant worry that she wasn't enough for her daughters. She had to be enough. She was all they had. The drive home to Willow Creek took 25 minutes through increasingly rough neighborhoods. Rachel had moved them here 6 months ago when their previous apartment became unaffordable. It wasn't ideal. The area had problems with drugs and crime, but it was what she could manage on her income. The water shutoff was temporary, just until she could catch up on bills, but everything felt overwhelming lately. As she pulled into the narrow alley beside their building, Rachel noticed something strange. Grocery bags, expensive ones from Pemberton's market, sat stacked beside their door. Her heart rate spiked. Someone had been to her apartment. She took the stairs 2 at a time, fumbling with her keys as worst-case scenarios flooded her mind. The door opened before she could unlock it. "Mommy!" Mia and Zoe crashed into her legs simultaneously, nearly knocking her over with the force of their relief. "We thought you weren't coming back," Zoe whispered into Rachel's jacket. "I always come back, baby," Rachel said, though the words felt hollow. She'd been saying them so often lately that she wondered if she was trying to convince herself as much as them. "Where's Chloe?" "Kitchen," Mia said, tugging Rachel toward the tiny galley. "She's making breakfast with the food the man brought." Rachel's blood went cold. "What man?" She found Chloe, standing on a chair at the stove, carefully scrambling eggs in a pan that was far too nice to be theirs. The counter was covered with groceries, real groceries, not the generic brands and day-old bread Rachel usually managed to afford. "Chloe Elizabeth Bennett," Rachel said, her voice sharp with fear. "What is all this? Who was here?" Chloe turned, her 8-year-old face serious. "A man saw me collecting rainwater yesterday. He was nice, Mom. He had sad eyes, like yours sometimes. A strange man saw you outside, alone?" Rachel's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Chloe, what have I told you about strangers?" "He wasn't scary," Chloe insisted. "He said his name was Marcus and that he was lost. He was looking for an old friend." Rachel felt the world tilt sideways. Marcus, it couldn't be. After 9 years of running, of hiding, of building a life in the shadows, it couldn't be possible that he'd found them, found her. What did he look like? Rachel's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Tall, dark hair but with some grey. Really nice clothes, but they got all wet because he stood in the rain talking to me. He had kind eyes, Mom, but super sad, like he'd been crying for a really long time." Rachel sank into one of their mismatched kitchen chairs, her legs unable to support her weight. It was him. Somehow, impossibly, Marcus Davidson had found them. "Mom!" Chloe's voice carried concern. "Are you sick? You look really pale." "I'm fine, sweetheart." The lie came automatically. Rachel had gotten good at lying over the years, to her daughters, to herself, to anyone who might ask too many questions. Did this man, did he say anything else? "He said some groceries would be delivered because I reminded him that there are still good people in the world. And Mom." Chloe climbed down from the chair and approached carefully. He seemed really lonely, like maybe he needed a friend too. Rachel closed her eyes, fighting back tears that had been building for 9 years. Marcus Davidson, brilliant, driven, beautiful Marcus, who had once promised her the world, standing in the rain outside their apartment, talking to the daughter he didn't know existed. "Mom, are we in trouble?" Mia's small voice broke through Rachel's spiral of panic. "No, baby, we're not in trouble." Another lie. They were in so much trouble, Rachel didn't even know where to begin calculating the damage. She needed to think, needed to plan. If Marcus was looking for her, he wouldn't stop until he found answers. And if he found answers, he'd discover Chloe. He'd discover that the child he'd been talking to, the little girl with sad eyes and fierce determination, was his daughter. The daughter he'd never known about because Rachel had disappeared in the middle of the night 9 years ago, taking with her the secret that she was 8 weeks pregnant with his child. Rachel's phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she answered. "Rachel?" The voice was older, deeper than she remembered, but unmistakably his. Marcus. After all these years, hearing him say her name felt like being struck by lightning. "I know this must be a shock," he continued when she didn't respond. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I saw your daughter yesterday, and Rachel, she looks just like you did at that age." Rachel found her voice, though it came out cracked and small. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want to understand," he said quietly. "I want to know why you left, why you disappeared without a word, why you never tried to contact me in 9 years. You wouldn't understand. Try me." Rachel looked at Chloe, who was watching her with those intelligent green eyes that were so heartbreakingly familiar. Marcus's eyes. She'd spent 8 years looking at Marcus's eyes in her daughter's face, loving them and hating them in equal measure. "I can't do this over the phone," Rachel whispered. "Then meet me, please. After all this time, don't I deserve an explanation?" Rachel closed her eyes. He deserved more than an explanation. He deserved to know he had a daughter. But telling him would change everything, would destroy the careful life she'd built in the shadows. "There's a park 2 blocks from here," she heard herself saying. "Riverside Park. I can meet you at noon. Rachel, She hung up before he could finish, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. 9 years of running, and it all came down to this moment. "Mom!" Chloe was beside her now, those green eyes full of concern. "Was that the man from yesterday?" Rachel nodded, unable to speak. "Are you going to see him?" "Yes." "Will you tell him about us?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Rachel looked at her daughter, brilliant, brave Chloe, who collected rainwater to survive but still worried about a stranger's sadness. Chloe, who had inherited Marcus's intelligence and determination, along with his eyes. "I don't know, sweetheart. I honestly don't know." But even as she said it, Rachel knew that the secret she'd carried for 9 years was about to destroy everything she'd worked so hard to protect, because Marcus Davidson didn't just deserve an explanation. He deserved to know that Chloe was his daughter. Riverside Park at noon was nearly empty, just a few joggers and an elderly man feeding pigeons by the pond. Rachel sat on a bench facing the water, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had gone white. She'd been sitting there for 20 minutes, watching every person who entered the park, her heart jumping each time she spotted a tall figure in the distance. She'd left the girls with Mrs. Chen, their elderly neighbor, who sometimes watched them when Rachel had overlapping work shifts. Mrs. Chen had asked no questions, just nodded when Rachel said she had an important meeting and might be late getting back. "You look exactly the same." Rachel turned to find Marcus standing 5 feet away, his hands in the pockets of an expensive charcoal coat. He was right. He looked exactly the same too, just with silver threading through his dark hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of years of stress and sleepless nights. "That's not true," Rachel said quietly. "I'm 36 years old, Marcus. I look every day of it." "You're beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice almost broke her resolve. He moved closer, gesturing to the bench. "May I?" Rachel nodded, scooting over to make room. When he sat beside her, she caught a whiff of his cologne, the same expensive scent he'd worn 9 years ago. It brought back a flood of memories she'd spent years trying to suppress. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either." Rachel stared at her hands. "How did you find me?" "I didn't. Not exactly." Marcus leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I was evaluating a property acquisition yesterday morning, that old community center 3 blocks from your street. I was driving back to the office when the storm hit, and I pulled over to wait it out. I saw Chloe collecting rainwater and—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "And what?" "And I couldn't drive away. Something about her reminded me of you. The way she held herself, her determination. She's remarkable, Rachel. Even in those circumstances, she was taking care of her sisters." Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. She's had to grow up too fast. "Is that why you left?" Marcus turned to face her fully. "Were you already pregnant? Were you scared to tell me?" The question hung between them like a live wire. Rachel had rehearsed this conversation 1,000 times in her mind, but now that the moment was here, every prepared speech evaporated. "It's complicated," she whispered. "Then uncomplicate it for me? Please." Marcus's voice carried 9 years of pain. "Do you have any idea what it was like waking up to find you gone? No note, no explanation, just your apartment cleared out like you'd never existed. I searched for you, Rachel. For years, I searched." "I know." "You know?" His voice sharp. "What do you mean, you know?" Rachel closed her eyes. "I mean, I know you looked for me." "He had to keep moving to stay ahead of the private investigators you hired. Detroit, then Portland, then Denver. Every time I thought I was safe, every time I started to build something, they would get close and I'd have to run again." Marcus stared at her in shock. "Why? Why were you running from me?" "Running? What did I do that was so terrible you couldn't even tell me you were leaving?" "You didn't do anything wrong," Rachel said quickly. "Marcus, you were perfect. You were kind and brilliant, and you loved me more than I thought I deserved. That was the problem." "I don't understand." Rachel stood up, needing distance to say what came next. "Do you remember that night in March, right before I left? We were at your apartment, and you got that call from your business partner about the Henderson deal." Marcus frowned, thinking back. "Vaguely. What about it?" "You left the room to take the call, and your laptop was open on the coffee table. I wasn't trying to spy, but I saw the email thread that was up on the screen." "What email thread?" Rachel's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The one where your business partner was concerned about you getting involved with someone from my background. Where he suggested you needed to be careful about women who might try to trap you with a pregnancy to access your family's money." Marcus went very still. "Rachel. And then there was your response, Marcus. Your response that said you understood his concerns and that you'd already thought about the potential complications. That you were being appropriately careful about protection and keeping things casual. That wasn't. That email wasn't about you specifically. David was being paranoid about a completely different situation with his cousin." "It doesn't matter what it was about," Rachel said, her voice breaking. "What mattered was that I was 8 weeks pregnant, and the man I loved was talking about pregnancy like it was a business risk to be managed." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus sat frozen on the bench, his face cycling through shock, understanding, and horror. "You were pregnant," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "When you left, you were pregnant with my child." "Yes. And you thought, you believed that I would see it as some kind of trap?" Rachel turned back to face him, tears flowing freely now. "I was 27 years old, Marcus. I was a waitress with a high school education and massive student debt from a nursing program I never finished. You were Marcus Davidson, tech genius with a trust fund and an MBA from Wharton. What was I supposed to think?" "You were supposed to think that I loved you," Marcus said, standing up. His voice was rising now, years of grief and confusion crystallizing into anger. "You were supposed to think that I would have been thrilled to have a child with you. You were supposed to trust me enough to have a conversation instead of disappearing in the middle of the night." "I was scared," Rachel shouted back. "I was terrified and young, and I made a mistake. I made a terrible, terrible mistake." "Where is she?" Marcus's voice went quiet again, deadly quiet. "Where is my daughter, Rachel?" "At home, with a neighbor." I want to meet her. Properly. I want to tell her who I am. Marcus, no. Rachel stepped closer, desperation clear in her voice. You can't just waltz into her life and announce you're her father. She doesn't know. She thinks her father is a soldier who died in Afghanistan before she was born. You told her I was dead. I told her that her father was a hero who died serving his country. It was easier than explaining that I was too much of a coward to tell him she existed. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, pacing now. This is insane, Rachel. You've kept me from my daughter for 8 years. 8 years of birthdays and first days of school and bedtime stories. How do you justify that? I thought I was protecting her. Rachel's voice cracked. I thought I was protecting all of us. You have to understand, Marcus, you live in a different world. Your world has photographers and gossip columns and society pages. What happens when the press finds out Marcus Davidson has an illegitimate daughter living in poverty? What happens to her when she becomes a target for people who want to hurt you? Marcus stopped pacing, the truth of her words hitting him like cold water. I would have protected both of you. How? By installing us in some apartment across town and visiting when it was convenient? By setting up a trust fund and hiring bodyguards? That's not a life, Marcus. That's being a kept secret. So instead, you chose this, living in poverty, working 3 jobs, your daughter collecting rainwater to drink. The accusation hung between them like a slap. Rachel felt the weight of 8 years of struggle, of choices made out of fear and pride, and a stubborn determination to prove she could survive on her own. I've done the best I could, she whispered. Your best? Marcus's voice was bitter now. Your best was depriving our daughter of a father who would have loved her unconditionally. Your best was letting her think she was abandoned instead of wanted. She doesn't think she was abandoned. She thinks her father was a hero. I could have been her hero, Rachel. I should have been her hero. The truth of that statement broke something inside Rachel. She sank back onto the bench, the fight going out of her all at once. You're right, she said quietly. You're absolutely right. I've made so many mistakes, Marcus, so many wrong choices, but I can't undo them now. I can't give you back those 8 years, and I can't change the fact that Chloe doesn't know you exist. Marcus sat back down beside her, his anger deflating into something that looked like grief. Chloe, is that really her name? Chloe Marie Bennett. I gave her your mother's middle name. She would have loved that, Marcus said softly. Mum always wondered why I never settled down, never had kids. She would have adored Chloe. Would have. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. Rachel felt a fresh wave of guilt crash over her. Marcus's mother had died never knowing she had a granddaughter. Another consequence of Rachel's choices, another relationship that could never be repaired. Marcus, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 8 years, Rachel. They sat in silence for several minutes, both lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Marcus spoke again. I want to be part of her life. I want to be her father. I know, and you should be. But we have to be careful about how we do this. Chloe is 8 years old, and her world is very small and very fragile. If we handle this wrong, we could destroy her sense of security. Then how do we handle it right? Rachel looked at him, seeing echoes of the man she'd fallen in love with 9 years ago underneath the hurt and anger. I don't know. I honestly don't know. But Marcus, there's something else you need to understand about Chloe. What? She's not just your daughter. She's special, gifted in ways that sometimes scare me. Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I mean, she taught herself to read before she was 3. She does complex mathematical calculations in her head for fun. Yesterday I found her taking apart our neighbor's broken radio and explaining to her sisters how electromagnetic frequencies work. She's intelligent, that's wonderful. It's beyond intelligence, Marcus. It's like she sees the world in patterns the rest of us can't understand. And if the press ever finds out about her abilities, about who her father is. Rachel's voice trailed off. She'll become a circus act, Marcus finished quietly. Exactly. Marcus was quiet for a long time, processing everything Rachel had told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, calmer, more measured. I want to meet her properly. Not as Marcus the stranger, but not as her father either. Not yet. We need time to figure this out, to plan how to tell her the truth without destroying her world. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we start slowly. That we find a way for me to be around without it seeming strange or threatening. Maybe I could. Marcus paused, thinking, what if I hired you? Hired me to do what? I don't know yet. Something that would give me a legitimate reason to be around your family without raising suspicions. Rachel stared at him. Marcus, I can't accept charity. It wouldn't be charity. It would be a job with real responsibilities and a real salary. Doing what? Marcus was quiet for a moment, his business mind working. Then his face brightened with something that looked like hope. My company just acquired that old community center in this neighborhood. We're renovating it into a youth education facility. We need someone to coordinate community outreach, to connect with local families and understand their needs. I'm not qualified for that kind of work. You're a mother who's been surviving in this community for months. You understand the challenges these families face better than any consultant I could hire. And Rachel. Marcus turned to face her fully. You're one of the smartest people I've ever known. The fact that you don't have a degree doesn't change that. Rachel felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real, tangible hope for a future that didn't involve constant struggle and fear. What would that mean exactly, this job? It would mean you could quit your other jobs. It would mean health insurance for you and the girls. It would mean Chloe could go to a good school, one that could challenge her intellectually. And what would it mean for you? Marcus smiled for the first time since he'd sat down. It would mean I get to know my daughter, slowly, carefully, in a way that doesn't turn her world upside down. And when she's ready to know the truth, when she's ready, we tell her together. Rachel felt tears starting again, but this time they were tears of relief rather than fear. You really think this could work? I think it has to work, Marcus said quietly. Because the alternative is losing both of you again, and I can't survive that twice. Rachel nodded, feeling something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for 8 years. Okay, let's try. But as they sat there making plans for a future neither of them had dared to imagine, neither Rachel nor Marcus realized that 8-year-old Chloe Bennett was far more perceptive than either of them had given her credit for. And she was already starting to put together pieces of a puzzle that would change everything they thought they knew about what came next. 3 weeks later, Rachel walked into the renovated community center for her first official day as community outreach coordinator, still unable to believe her life had changed so dramatically. The salary Marcus had offered was more than she'd made from all 3 of her previous jobs combined, and for the first time in years she'd been able to buy groceries without counting every dollar. Ms. Bennett? A young woman with a tablet approached. I'm Sarah Kim, Mr. Davidson's project manager. He's asked me to show you around and get you settled. Rachel nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The building was stunning. Marcus had spared no expense in the renovation. State-of-the-art computer labs, a library with floor-to-ceiling windows, art studios with natural light, and a gymnasium that rivaled anything at the private schools across town. The goal, Sarah explained as they toured, is to provide educational and recreational opportunities for children in the community, with a focus on identifying and nurturing exceptional talents. Exceptional talents? Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Davidson believes every child has unique gifts that just need the right environment to flourish. We'll be offering everything from advanced mathematics and science programs to arts and music therapy. Rachel thought of Chloe, who had spent the morning explaining quantum physics concepts she'd learned from library books. The irony wasn't lost on her. Marcus was creating exactly the kind of program that would be perfect for their daughter, without even knowing she existed. "Speaking of Mr. Davidson," Sarah continued, "he should be here shortly. He likes to personally oversee all his education initiatives." Rachel's stomach fluttered with nerves. They'd agreed to keep their interactions professional during work hours, but she wasn't sure how convincing they'd be. 9 years apart hadn't diminished the connection between them. If anything, the shared secret of Chloe had intensified it. "Rachel." Marcus's voice came from behind her, and she turned to find him standing in the doorway of what would become her office. He wore dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, more casual than she'd ever seen him, but somehow the relaxed look made him even more attractive. "Mr. Davidson," Rachel replied formally, acutely aware of Sarah watching their interaction. "I hope Sarah's been giving you the full tour. This project means a lot to me." His eyes met hers briefly, and Rachel understood the double meaning. This wasn't just about the community center. It was about finding a way back to each other and to Chloe. "It's incredible," Rachel said honestly. "The children in this neighborhood are going to have opportunities they never dreamed of." "That's the goal," Marcus smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "I was hoping we could discuss your ideas for community engagement over lunch. There's a cafe down the street that makes excellent sandwiches." Sarah excused herself to handle other business, leaving Rachel and Marcus alone for the first time since their meeting in the park. "How are you really doing?" Marcus asked, his professional demeanor dropping slightly. "Overwhelmed," Rachel admitted. "Good, overwhelmed, but still overwhelmed. The girls can't believe the change in our circumstances. Mia asked me yesterday if we won the lottery." "In a way, you did." Marcus's voice was soft. "How's Chloe adjusting?" "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." Rachel glanced around to make sure they were alone. "She's been asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "About you, about why a stranger would help us so generously, about why you seem familiar somehow." Rachel paused. "Marcus, she's incredibly perceptive. I'm worried she's going to figure things out before we're ready to tell her." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we're overthinking this. Chloe is clearly exceptional. Perhaps she's mature enough to handle the truth." "She's 8 years old," Rachel protested. "She still believes in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy." "She also taught herself basic calculus by watching YouTube videos," Marcus pointed out. "There's a difference between intellectual maturity and emotional readiness, but don't underestimate her." Their conversation was interrupted by Rachel's phone ringing. The caller ID showed Chloe's school. "Miss Bennett? This is Principal Martinez from Riverside Elementary. We need you to come in immediately. There's been an incident with Chloe." Rachel's blood went cold. "What kind of incident? Is she hurt?" "She's not hurt, but it's complicated. Can you come in now?" "I'll be right there." Rachel hung up, her hands shaking. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked. "Something happened at school. I have to go." "I'm coming with you." "Marcus, you can't. How would I explain why my boss is accompanying me to my daughter's school?" "I don't care about explanations," Marcus said firmly. "Something's wrong with our daughter, and I'm not sitting here wondering what happened." Again, the possessive way, he said "our daughter" sent a jolt through Rachel, but she didn't have time to process it. 20 minutes later, they sat in Principal Martinez's office, facing a woman who looked both impressed and concerned. "Chloe isn't in trouble exactly," Principal Martinez began, "but what happened today was unprecedented." "What happened?" Rachel asked. During computer class, Chloe noticed that the school's Wi-Fi network was running slowly. Without permission, she accessed the server settings and reorganized our network configuration. In 30 minutes, she increased our connection speed by 200% and fixed security issues that our IT consultant said would have taken him weeks to identify. Rachel felt her heart sink. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd been hoping to avoid. Furthermore, Principal Martinez continued, when I asked her where she learned about computer networks, she said she'd been reading about it online and watching educational videos. She then proceeded to explain internet protocols to me in terms I actually understood. Marcus leaned forward, unable to hide his fascination. How did the other students react? That's part of the problem. Some of the children are calling her weird, others are afraid of her, and a few are treating her like she's some kind of celebrity. Principal Martinez looked directly at Rachel. Ms. Bennett, your daughter needs to be in a program designed for highly gifted children. This level of intellectual ability requires specialized attention. What are you suggesting? Rachel asked, though she already knew the answer. I'm suggesting you consider transferring her to the Davidson Academy for Exceptional Students. It's a private school, very expensive, but they have a scholarship program for children who demonstrate extraordinary potential. Rachel's eyes widened. She looked at Marcus, who was studying his hands with intense concentration. Davidson Academy? Rachel repeated. As in Marcus Davidson? Yes. The tech entrepreneur who founded it about 5 years ago. Apparently, he believes that truly gifted children need environments where their abilities can be nurtured rather than feared. The irony was so thick, Rachel could barely breathe. Marcus had unknowingly created the perfect school for his own daughter, and now fate was pushing them toward a revelation that would change everything. I'll need to research the school, Rachel said carefully, and discuss it with Chloe. Of course. But Ms. Bennett, Principal Martinez's voice was gentle but firm. Don't wait too long. Chloe is clearly bored and understimulated here. If she doesn't find appropriate challenges soon, she might start creating her own entertainment, and given her capabilities, that could become problematic. As they left the school, Marcus and Rachel walked to their cars in silence. Finally, Marcus spoke. She's incredible, isn't she? She's 8 years old and she just rewrote a computer network like it was a grocery list, Rachel said, her voice shaking. Marcus, this is exactly what I was afraid of. People are going to start paying attention to her. Maybe that's not entirely bad. Are you serious? You just heard what happened. The other kids are calling her weird. The other kids at Riverside Elementary are calling her weird, Marcus corrected. The kids at Davidson Academy would understand her. They'd be like her. Rachel stopped walking. You planned this. What? The job, the community center, the convenient location near a school that can't handle gifted children. You planned for this to happen. Marcus had the grace to look slightly guilty. I didn't plan for Chloe to reorganize the school's network, but yes, I hoped that eventually she'd outgrow her current environment and need something more challenging. You manipulated us. I created opportunities, Marcus said firmly. There's a difference, is there? You dangled a job and financial security in front of a desperate woman to get access to your daughter. How is that different from manipulation? Marcus stopped walking too, turning to face her fully. It's different because everything I offered was real. The job is real, Rachel. You're genuinely good at it, and you're making a real difference in this community. The financial security is real. You'll never have to worry about rent or food or medical bills again. And the opportunities for Chloe are real too. But they all come with strings attached. The only string attached is that I want to be part of my daughter's life. Is that really so unreasonable? Rachel stared at him, seeing determination in his eyes that reminded her why she'd fallen in love with him in the first place. Marcus Davidson didn't accept defeat. He found solutions, created opportunities, made things happen through sheer force of will. "What if she hates me when she finds out the truth?" Rachel asked quietly. "What if she can never forgive me for lying to her about her father?" "Then we'll deal with that together," Marcus said simply. "But Rachel, we can't keep protecting her from the truth forever. She's too smart and too perceptive. If we don't tell her soon, she's going to figure it out on her own." As if summoned by their conversation, Rachel's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Chloe asking many questions about the man who brought groceries. Says she wants to meet him again. What should I tell her?" Rachel showed Marcus the message. He read it twice, then looked up at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I think," Marcus said slowly, "it's time to stop running from this conversation." And that evening, Rachel paced her small kitchen while Chloe sat at the table with her homework, occasionally glancing up with the observational intensity that made her seem far older than 8. Mia and Zoe were in the living room, building elaborate structures with blocks Marcus had anonymously included in another grocery delivery. "Mom, you're making me dizzy," Chloe said without looking up from her math worksheet, "and you've been acting strange since you picked me up from school." Rachel stopped pacing. "I'm not acting strange. You asked me the same question about my day 4 times. You forgot to turn off the stove when making dinner. And you've checked your phone approximately every 90 seconds for the past hour." Chloe finally looked up, those green eyes, Marcus's eyes, studying her with uncomfortable precision. "Something's bothering you." Sometimes Rachel forgot that having a genius for a daughter meant privacy was nearly impossible. Chloe noticed everything, analyzed everything, and had an uncanny ability to read people's emotional states with the same precision she applied to mathematical equations. "Principal Martinez told me about what happened in computer class today," Rachel said, settling into the chair across from Chloe. "Was I in trouble?" Chloe's voice was carefully neutral, but Rachel caught the slight tension around her eyes. "No, sweetheart, you weren't in trouble, but Mrs. Martinez is concerned that your current school isn't challenging enough for you." Chloe set down her pencil. "She wants me to go somewhere else." It wasn't a question. Of course, Chloe had already figured out where this conversation was heading. "There's a special school for children with exceptional abilities," Rachel said carefully. "It's called Davidson Academy. They have programs designed for kids who think the way you do." "You mean kids who are weird?" "Chloe Elizabeth Bennett, don't you ever call yourself that again." Rachel's voice was sharp, with protective anger. "You are not weird. You are brilliant and talented, and any child would be lucky to have your gifts. The kids at school don't think so. The kids at school don't understand, but the kids at Davidson Academy would." Chloe was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Davidson Academy," she repeated slowly, "as in Marcus Davidson, the man who brought us groceries." Rachel felt her heart stop. "What makes you think that?" "I looked him up after he visited. Marcus Davidson, founder and CEO of Davidson Technologies. He graduated from MIT at 19, founded his first company at 22. Chloe's voice was matter-of-fact, as if she was reciting multiplication tables. "He also established the Davidson Academy for Exceptional Students 5 years ago. The Academy's mission statement is to provide nurturing environments where gifted children can reach their full potential." Rachel stared at her daughter, momentarily speechless. "You researched him?" "I research anyone who takes an unusual interest in our family. It's a basic safety precaution." Chloe tilted her head. "Did you know he never married? The internet says there were rumors about a girlfriend who disappeared years ago, but no confirmed relationships since then." Chloe: "Mom, why would a billionaire tech entrepreneur randomly help a family he doesn't know? And why would you accept help from him? You always say, we don't take charity." Rachel felt the walls of her carefully constructed story crumbling around her. She'd underestimated Chloe's curiosity and research abilities. Of course, her daughter would investigate Marcus. Of course, she'd find inconsistencies in the narrative Rachel had tried to create. It's complicated, sweetheart. Complicated how? Chloe's voice carried the same relentless logic she applied to every problem. Either he's a stranger who randomly decided to help us, which doesn't make sense given his background and personality profile, or he's not actually a stranger. Rachel closed her eyes, feeling the truth pushing against her chest like a living thing demanding release. Chloe, is he my father? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Rachel opened her eyes to find Chloe watching her with an expression that was equal parts hope and fear. What makes you ask that? Simple process of elimination, Chloe said with 8-year-old matter-of-factness. I've always suspected the story about my father dying in Afghanistan might not be completely accurate. Plus, you get sad in a specific way when you talk about him. Not grief sad, but guilt sad. Rachel felt tears starting. Chloe. Also, I did the math on when you would have met Marcus Davidson. The timeline matches with when you lived in Chicago before I was born. And Mom? Chloe's voice softened slightly. I have his eyes. I've been looking at pictures of him online, and I have his exact eyes. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel looked at her 8-year-old daughter, this brilliant, perceptive child who had just deduced the truth that Rachel had spent years hiding. You're right, Rachel whispered. Marcus Davidson is your father. Chloe nodded as if she'd expected the confirmation, but Rachel saw her hands tremble slightly. Why didn't you tell him about me? Because I was scared and young and I made a terrible mistake. Does he know now? Yes. He found out 3 weeks ago when he saw you collecting rainwater. And the job? The community center? He created it so he could be near us, near you. Chloe was quiet for several minutes, processing this information with the same methodical approach she used for everything else. Finally, she looked up at Rachel with those green eyes that were so heartbreakingly familiar. Is he a good person? The question caught Rachel off guard. What do you mean? I mean, based on your personal experience with him, not his public reputation, is Marcus Davidson a good person? Would he be a good father? Rachel thought about Marcus 9 years ago. Brilliant and driven, but also kind, patient with her insecurities, generous with his time and attention. She thought about Marcus 3 weeks ago, standing in the rain talking to a little girl with gentle concern. She thought about the job he'd created, the opportunities he'd offered, the way he'd respected her need to move slowly for Chloe's sake. Yes, Rachel said quietly, he's a very good person, and I think he would be an extraordinary father. Then I want to meet him, really meet him, not as Marcus the stranger, but as Marcus my father. Chloe, are you sure? This is a big decision. Once we tell him you know, everything changes. Chloe stood up from the table, walked over to Rachel, and climbed into her lap the way she used to when she was smaller. Mom, everything already changed the day he saw me collecting rainwater. We're just catching up to what's already true. Rachel wrapped her arms around her daughter, marveling at Chloe's wisdom and maturity. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart, Chloe said matter-of-factly. I just haven't always been brave enough to use it. But I want to be brave now. I want to meet my father. Rachel pulled out her phone with shaking hands and sent a text to Marcus. Can you come over? Chloe wants to meet her father. The response came back immediately. On my way. 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock on their door. Rachel opened it to find Marcus standing in the hallway, his usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled, his eyes bright with nervous energy. She knows, he asked quietly. She figured it out herself. She's been researching you for weeks. Marcus smiled, the expression mixing pride and amazement. Of course she has. Rachel led him into the living room, where Chloe sat on the couch, having changed into her best dress, a simple blue cotton thing that brought out her eyes. Mia and Zoe flanked her like protective bookends, though they clearly didn't understand what was happening. "Hello, Chloe," Marcus said, his voice gentler than Rachel had ever heard it. "Your mum tells me you've figured out who I am." "Hello, Marcus," Chloe replied formally, "though I suppose I should call you Dad now." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Rachel watched his eyes fill with tears as he crouched down to Chloe's level. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," he said softly. "I know this is confusing and probably scary." "It's not scary," Chloe said with characteristic directness. "It's actually a relief. I've always felt like there was a missing piece in my life, and now I know what it was." "Can I?" Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "Can I hug you?" Chloe studied him for a moment, then nodded. Marcus moved slowly, carefully, as if she might disappear if he moved too fast. When his arms closed around her, something seemed to settle in both of them. "I'm sorry I wasn't here before," Marcus whispered into her hair. "I'm sorry I missed so much." "That wasn't your fault," Chloe said pragmatically. "Mom made that decision to protect me." "It wasn't the right decision, but it came from love." Marcus looked over Chloe's head at Rachel, his expression full of gratitude and forgiveness. "Your daughter is remarkable." "Our daughter," Rachel corrected softly. "Our daughter," Marcus agreed, and the words sounded like a prayer. Mia, who had been watching this interaction with growing confusion, finally spoke up. "Chloe, why are you hugging the grocery man?" Chloe pulled back from Marcus, then looked at her little sisters with the patient expression she wore when explaining complex concepts. "Mia, Zoe, this is our father. Marcus is our dad." The twins stared at Marcus with identical expressions of shock, then at Rachel for confirmation. "It's true," Rachel said gently. "Marcus is your father." "But you said our dad was a soldier," Zoe said, her 6-year-old voice confused. "I was wrong," Rachel admitted. "I made a mistake, and I'm sorry." Mia, ever the practical one, walked over to Marcus and looked him up and down assessingly. "Are you rich?" Marcus laughed, the sound full of genuine joy. "Yes, I am." "Are you going to take care of us now?" "If you'll let me, yes." Mia considered this, then nodded approvingly. "Good. Mom works too much and she's always tired." "I'm going to make sure your mom doesn't have to work so hard anymore," Marcus promised. Zoe, not to be outdone by her twin, approached Marcus shyly. "Do you like tea parties? I've never been to one, but I'd very much like to learn." "I'll teach you," Zoe said seriously. "It's very important to hold your pinky up." As Rachel watched Marcus interact with her daughters, their daughters, she felt a sense of completeness she'd never dared to hope for. The family she'd dreamed of 9 years ago was finally coming together, just in a way she'd never expected. But as the evening wore on and the girls grew more comfortable with Marcus, Rachel noticed Chloe watching her with those perceptive green eyes. Later, after Marcus had left and the twins were in bed, Chloe approached Rachel in the kitchen. "Mom, there's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told me yet." Rachel's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I mean, there's another reason you ran away, something beyond just being scared about the pregnancy, the way you and Marcus look at each other. There's unfinished business there." Rachel stared at her 8-year-old daughter, once again amazed by her perceptiveness. "You're right," Rachel said quietly. "There is something else, but that's a conversation for another day. Does it have to do with why you've never dated anyone? Why you always get sad when romantic movies have happy endings?" Rachel felt her breath catch. "Chloe, it's okay, Mom. I think I already know." Chloe hugged Rachel tightly. "You're still in love with him, aren't you?" Rachel closed her eyes, feeling the truth she'd buried for 9 years finally surface. "Yes, I never stopped loving him. And he still loves you too." "How can you possibly know that?" Chloe pulled back with a small smile. Because of the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching. And because no one stays single for 9 years unless they're waiting for someone. As Rachel tucked Chloe into bed that night, her daughter had one final observation. "Mom, I think our family is going to be really good once everyone stops being scared of being happy." And for the first time in 9 years, Rachel thought she might be right. 6 months later, Rachel stood in the kitchen of their new house, a beautiful colonial in the suburbs, with a yard big enough for the girls to play safely, watching through the window as Marcus taught Chloe how to change the oil in his car. It was a Saturday morning ritual they'd developed, these father-daughter mechanical lessons that somehow always devolved into philosophical discussions about engineering and innovation. "No, Dad, you have to let the oil drain completely before adding the new filter," Chloe was saying, her 8-year-old voice carrying the authority of someone who'd already read the manual cover to cover. "Otherwise, you'll get contamination." "You're absolutely right," Marcus replied, his voice full of pride. "How did you figure that out?" "I watched a YouTube video about automotive maintenance and cross-referenced it with the manufacturer's specifications," Chloe said matter-of-factly. "Did you know that most people change their oil too frequently? The interval recommendations are based on older technology." Rachel smiled, still amazed by how naturally Marcus had slipped into fatherhood. He attended every school event, helped with homework, even when it meant learning topics he'd forgotten since college, and somehow managed to challenge Chloe intellectually while still letting her be a child. The Davidson Academy had been perfect for Chloe, just as Marcus had predicted. Surrounded by other gifted children, she'd blossomed socially as well as academically. She had real friends now, kids who thought her ability to recite pi to 50 decimal places was cool rather than weird. "Mom!" Mia's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Dad says we can paint our rooms any color we want. Can mine be purple? Like really, really purple?" Rachel turned to find Mia and Zoe standing in the kitchen doorway, both girls wearing matching grins and paint-splattered overalls. Marcus had enlisted them as his assistant contractors for the house renovations, a role they took very seriously. "Any color you want, baby," Rachel said, ruffling Mia's hair, "as long as it makes you happy." "What about you, Mom?" Zoe asked. "What color makes you happy?" Rachel looked out the window again, where Marcus was now lying on his back under the car while Chloe handed him tools with the precision of a surgical nurse. "I think I'm pretty happy with all the colors we have right now." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of changes. Marcus had legally adopted the twins and was in the process of changing Chloe's birth certificate to reflect his paternity. They'd moved into this house 3 months ago. Not Marcus's mansion in the hills, but a family home in a good neighborhood where the girls could have normal childhoods. Rachel had thrown herself into her work at the community center, discovering a passion for advocacy and education she'd never known she possessed. The program was thriving, providing services to hundreds of local families, and Rachel found deep satisfaction in helping other parents navigate systems and opportunities for their children. But the most significant change was in her relationship with Marcus. They'd been careful, taking things slowly for the sake of the girls, but the connection between them had only deepened with time. They were different people than they'd been 9 years ago, older, more mature, tempered by years of struggle and loss. But the fundamental compatibility was still there. "Rachel?" Marcus's voice came from the doorway, and she turned to find him wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course." Rachel followed him into the living room, where afternoon sunlight streamed through windows that looked out onto a yard where the girls could play safely. "I got a call from the adoption attorney this morning," Marcus said, settling onto the couch beside her. "All the paperwork is finalized. Officially, as of yesterday, I'm the legal father of all 3 girls." "How do you feel about that?" Rachel asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. Complete, Marcus said simply. For the first time in 9 years, I feel complete. Rachel took his hand, marveling at how perfectly their fingers fit together. They adore you, you know. Even Chloe, with all her analysis and logic, she lights up when you walk in the room. She's incredible, Rachel. They all are. Sometimes I can't believe I almost missed out on all of this. But you didn't miss out. You're here now, and that's what matters. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. There's something else I wanted to talk to you about. What? Marcus shifted on the couch, suddenly nervous in a way Rachel hadn't seen since those early days when they were figuring out how to be around each other again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Rachel's breath caught. Marcus. 9 years ago I bought this ring, Marcus said, his voice soft. I was going to propose to you the week you disappeared. I've carried it with me ever since, not because I was waiting for you to come back, but because I couldn't bring myself to let go of what we had. Tears sprang to Rachel's eyes. Marcus, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Marcus slid off the couch and onto one knee, opening the box to reveal a simple but stunning solitaire diamond. Rachel Bennett, I loved you 9 years ago when we were young and thought we had all the time in the world. I love you now when we're older and know how precious and fragile happiness can be. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband as well as the father of our children? Rachel stared at the ring, at Marcus, at the life they'd built together from the ashes of old mistakes and lost time. Are you sure? We've been through so much, and I've made so many mistakes. We've both made mistakes, Marcus interrupted gently. But every mistake led us here, to this moment, to our family. I don't want to waste any more time being careful or scared. I want to marry you, Rachel. I want us to be a real family, officially and completely. Yes, Rachel whispered, then louder. Yes, yes, of course, yes. Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and kissed her with 9 years of longing and love and gratitude. When they broke apart, Rachel was crying and laughing at the same time. Is this really happening? She asked. Are we really getting our happy ending? We're really getting our beginning, Marcus corrected. Everything before this was just the prologue. Their moment was interrupted by the sound of small feet thundering down the stairs. Mom! Dad! Chloe's voice carried excitement. I just figured out how to optimize the house's energy efficiency using solar panels and a battery storage system. The initial investment would pay for itself in 18 months, and we could potentially sell excess power back to the grid. Marcus and Rachel looked at each other and burst into laughter. I think our daughter just solved climate change in our living room, Marcus said. Our daughter, Rachel repeated, still getting used to the pronoun that included both of them. Chloe appeared in the doorway, followed by Mia and Zoe, all 3 girls stopping short when they saw their parents' faces. What's wrong? Zoe asked with 6-year-old concern. Why is everyone crying? Undo their happy tears, Rachel said, wiping her eyes. Dad just asked me to marry him. And she said yes, Marcus added, lifting Mia and Zoe into a group hug. Chloe studied her parents with those perceptive green eyes, taking in the ring on Rachel's finger, the joy on their faces, the completeness of the moment. Good, she said with characteristic matter-of-factness. I was wondering when you were going to figure that out. The statistical probability of 2 people who love each other as much as you do staying unmarried was getting increasingly unlikely. Marcus laughed, pulling Chloe into the family embrace. Leave it to our genius daughter to turn a proposal into a mathematical theorem. I love you all so much, Rachel said, looking around at her family, at Marcus, who'd never stopped loving her even when she'd given him every reason to, at Chloe, whose brilliant mind was matched only by her generous heart, at Mia and Zoe, who'd accepted Marcus as their father with the easy trust of children who knew they were loved. "We love you too, Mom," Chloe said softly. "And you know what? I think everything worked out exactly the way it was supposed to." As they stood there in their living room, surrounded by the evidence of a life built on love and second chances, Rachel realized Chloe was right. Every choice, every mistake, every moment of pain and fear had led them here, to this perfect, imperfect, absolutely complete family. 8-year-old Chloe, who had started this journey by collecting rainwater in a bucket, had given them all something far more precious than water. She'd given them hope. She'd given them each other. She'd given them home. And sometimes, in the middle of ordinary moments, Marcus helping with homework, the twins building elaborate blanket forts, Chloe explaining some new discovery over dinner, Rachel would remember that scared young woman who'd run away 9 years ago, thinking she was protecting everyone. That woman had been wrong about so many things, but she'd been right about one. Love was worth protecting. It was worth fighting for. It was worth waiting for. And it was worth coming home to. The Bennett Davidson family's story had begun with rain and tears and a little girl's determination to take care of the people she loved. It would continue with sunshine and laughter and the knowledge that sometimes the best families are the ones that have to find their way back to each other. And in years to come, when people asked Chloe about her childhood, she would always remember it as beginning the day a billionaire saw a little girl collecting rainwater and decided to stop running from love, because that was the day their real story began. That was the day they all came home